The Valorant community is absolutely outraged at the fact that there are a minimum of 12 matches in the 2024 schedule. And I don't think it particularly matters, and I quite like the 2024 schedule. So I'm going to try to explain why my opinion differs so drastically from the average fan's opinion seems to be. And I think that this entire situation is a great example of, one, how a soundbite or a particular catchy phrase really hooks people into something. 12 matches? Only 12 matches? It stirs up emotive thoughts. I think it also shows how few people actually think things through logically rather than just throwing things out there when it comes to topics like this, but also tons of different topics on the internet, and how often the sentiment is twisted by recent experience. The fact that we've just been through a sparse 6-month off-season is stoking frustration in the community. And if you're here because you just want to learn more about Valorant formats and stuff like that and this kind of thing, then that's great. Stick around. I'm going to be trying to explain what I've learned over 9 years of building tournaments myself, analyzing tournaments, running them, giving feedback to developers, studying esports more generally. And if you're here because you vehemently disagree with my opinion, first of all, thank you for being open-minded enough to watch a video about it rather than just ranting and not paying any attention to the other side of the argument. But while I'm going through this, I'm going to be using examples of people. I'm not trying to call out specific people. I'm just using them as examples of community sentiment. So if you see your name pop up in a Reddit thread or something like that, I'm not personally calling you stupid. I just think that the idea that people are vocalizing hasn't been thought through well enough. And it does frustrate me, this topic, because like I said, I've spent 9 years doing this stuff and fans don't think about it as much as they, I'm not going to say as much as they should do. They're fans. It's not their job. But there's a large furor at the moment that possibly didn't need to happen. So let's get to the crux of it. So they announced this 2024 Valorant Champions Tour. They put out a video, yada yada, tons of stuff, the Kickoff Tournament format. I'm not going to go through it all, but specifically this line at the bottom here, 10 regular season matches per team across Stage 1 and Stage 2. And people originally thought, when they were just doing their initial reactions to this, I saw a lot of people just being like, yeah, well, that's 10 in Stage 1 and 10 in Stage 2. But it's not actually. It's, like I said, actually, in a video, which I'll link up here, months ago I said this, that it would probably be a round robin split across Stage 1 and Stage 2. Because, again, if you know what you're talking about, if you have a lot of experience, small amounts of information become very easy to extrapolate what the circuit is going to look like. And I'm going to do that later on. I can give you a sneak peek, if you like, of tons of different formats, which I'm going to go through later on to give you guys an idea about what the league might look like in 2025, 2027, not using inside information, just using publicly available information and a bit of logic and extrapolation. So this was the line that got people kicking off. On top of that, I mean, you've got now, Leo's tweets being analyzed, because everyone loves a good Leo tweet analysis, don't they? Teams being divided into 2 groups, etc. People reacting, if only we had more months in the year, yada, yada, yada. General anger in the Valorant community generally. Sorry for these pages taking a while to load. And Leo saying that we like the baseline number of matches that each team currently plays. We're not looking to increase that overall, when someone was responding to him on Twitter saying that there were 4 more months in the year to play with. And, this has genuinely caused outrage. There is a change.org petition with over 1,000 signatures to remove Leo Faria from the head of Valorant esports, which is just, hello? Do you remember when I was doing the G2 video and I was talking about proportional responses? That the community has some level of responsibility to make proportional levels of outrage to how bad something actually is. This is too far, guys. This is too far. All right? This is too far. So let's start here. Is it actually going to be true that there are minimum 12 matches this year? Well, yes, it is. If you have a look at the Kickoff Tournament, well, first of all, we know that there's going to be 10 regular season matches. There's no LCQ this year as well. So if you don't make the playoffs, you don't make an international event, you would only play those 10 regular season matches. Plus, you would play the Kickoff Tournament here. And if you did the absolute worst that you could, there will be 3 teams that will go out in each region. So that's 12 teams overall across the entirety of VCT that will go out with an LL 2-loss record, and therefore are potential candidates for only playing 12 matches in the year. So like I said, there are 12 teams across out of 44 that could only play 12 matches this year. And if you look at that sample from 2023, if you look at the bottom 3 teams from the first tournament of the year in 2023, or the very beginning of that kind of year, only 1 made playoffs in their region. So if you use the same kind of proportion, this year, you should expect about 10 or 11 out of those 12 to only play the minimum matches, which is actually quite a lot. Right? That's not the case that, barely any team will play the minimum. Well, actually, like about 25%, just under, maybe more like, 20%, something like that. But it's going to vary. About 25% of the teams are probably going to play the minimum number of matches this year because they will underperform. How does that compare to 2023? Well, in 2023, we had 1 match at lock-in, right? If you went out immediately because it was single elimination. We then had 9 matches of the regular season, taking you up to 10. And you had 1 match at LCQ if you bombed out. Now, obviously some teams are not going to bomb out in LCQ. Some teams are not going to bomb out this year as well. But that was how it worked. And there were 5 out of 30 of the teams, Detonation Focus Me, Heretics, BBL, MIBR, and Global Esports. I'm going to pull up Heretics here just as an example because they were one of the teams of the 5 that only played 11 matches throughout the entirety of the year. I would expect about double the amount of teams to sit on the minimum for 2024. So if you have a look at this, so I've prepared some graphs here. So you have a look. Now, I'm going to explain this to you. Don't worry, you won't get too lost. So let me just zoom in slightly, actually. Let's take it to like 120%, something like that. There you go. So you can see here that these are the matches, the numbers that people played in 2023. Now, I'm going to exclude Vitality because they actually declined to play in LCQ at the end of the year because of Twiston's tragic death. Now, they would have played more, and it's unknowable how many more they would have played. They seemed like a fairly good team that would have probably won some matches in LCQ. So I thought it fairest to just exclude them from this. So this is a sample of the 29 teams apart from Vitality and how many matches they played in 2023. Now you can see here that there were 5 teams that played the minimum. And then there's this grouping, and I've actually put them into buckets down here because there's a bucket of poorer performers who played only 13 to 14. Maybe they won 1 game at lock-in. Maybe they won a couple of games at LCQ, something like that, but didn't go on a major run. Then there's these teams, generally these 3 teams here were just making it to domestic playoffs, but then weren't able to make it much further. There was a large grouping around 17 matches played, and those were generally the teams that had either gone on a run in LCQ or had made it to playoffs earlier and done slightly better. And then you get these 2 buckets at the top, which are 18 matches to 29 matches in 2023. And those are the people that either made it regularly to Masters but didn't make crazy deep runs, or they made frequent deep Masters runs. And there were 8 teams that made frequent deep Masters runs who ended up playing 24 to 29 matches instead of the minimum number 11. And this, I think, is a much more sensible way to view the overall system, because you can't only view a format through the lens of minimum match theory, which I've jokingly titled this spreadsheet as, because it just ignores all of the facets of how the format works. So, like I said, the buckets of exposure here, you have this bucket here and this bucket here. Now, this 13 to 14 bucket is now more likely to, instead of being 13 to 14, it's more likely to simply sit at the minimum, which means that the 11 bucket and the 13 to 14 bucket are quite likely to combine and sit more towards the minimum 12 games. And that's because LCQ doesn't exist anymore. And that aligns with our previous estimate that I gave of around 10 to 11 teams, which is twice the number in 2023. That doesn't quite account for China being involved, but I think overall it is going to be about twice the number of teams. So, like I said, I don't think minimum matches is a great metric to base your opinions of the entire format on. And I think a lot of the arguing being done online in the middle of this debate is being done in pretty bad faith because people are bored and frustrated by a long off-season, which, by the way, already has a commitment to being reduced in 2025. And so I just want to bring up some of the Reddit threads as well here, which this one 2 days ago, many criticisms of the 2024 format, which I think was a little overblown, but let's have a look at some of it. Now, one of the main things that I saw a lot of is people arguing on behalf of those who only follow a single team. Now, I only saw 2 people genuinely making this argument for themselves. And then I saw everybody else, and I've looked through a lot of these Reddit threads. I haven't looked at every single comment, but I've looked at a lot of them. I saw 2 people genuinely saying, hi, I actually only follow 100 Thieves. Actually, both of them were 100 Thieves. I'm sure that there are others that follow big teams like Sentinels, Karmine Corps, that kind of thing, who only dip in for their team's games. I am aware that this is a concept that exists. But what my point being, that this is first of all, that these people do not exist in a large percentage, not large enough to base the entire format around. And secondly, that most of the people who are getting angry on behalf of those people, like, for example, Hyper Elf, who has the EDG logo, the Fnatic logo, the NRG logo, the Bleed logo, the Genji logo, fucking Tyloo, Paper X, and then Genji again just for good measure. Which, maybe I'm reading too much into the little funny logos that people put on the Valorant competitive, but the amount of people who had like 10 teams listed who were like, but what about the people who only follow one team? What are we going to do? Like, you ain't them. You ain't them. And I think while it's not a bad idea to bring up smaller groups and argue on their behalf, it does make it feel like that group is larger when everybody's arguing on behalf of that smaller group. Now, if you look at majority viewership trends, the actual main way in which people watch Valorant is that they have one league that they particularly like, and they watch most of the top games from that league, and maybe have 1 or 2 teams that they particularly like. So they'll watch, almost all the games of a couple of teams. They'll watch some big highlight games, and then they'll watch the international. And you can see that in the viewership data. You can see that. On top of this, if you only look at things through the perspective of minimum matches, then for every 1 minimum match that you add for your team, you're a 100 Thieves fan, you're in charge of the format, I want more games for 100 Thieves. Well, in order to do that, you have to add minimum matches for everybody else, which then balloons up the system. So it's not as easy as you might think to add more and more domestic matches without compromising the overall schedule, the amount of international tournaments that you have, and to make domestic matches actually fit into a system. One of the other things that I saw a lot of, actually not a lot of, but certainly something that I saw was this take. Why is it so hard to admit that it was only done to save money? There's simply no other good reason on making a decision like this. If he thinks otherwise, then he's not the right person to be running the league. This is an absurd comment. This is absurd. It's not absurd because it has no merit. It is absurd because it's so hyperbolic. There is simply no need for this level of hyperbole. Now, do I think it was done to save money? No, I don't think so, and I'll explain why later. Do I think that there are other options where money would be a limiting factor? Yes, and I'll get into some of those later. But that's not the case with what's currently going on right now. Here's another comment as well that I just want to briefly touch on, which is, again, heavily upvoted here. I'm not going through the very dregs of the arguments to try and create a straw man here. I don't understand why Riot's so reluctant to use the asset they have. Players do generally want to play more matches than they currently have as the minimum. However, when you look at the teams that were playing towards the upper end, they were complaining of bUrNoUt. So if you increase the minimum amount of matches, but you keep all of the international tournaments exactly the same, you're going to put more and more stress on those top level players as well. So that's something to keep in mind. Casters want to cast. Actually, fuck off. If you're trying to make a system that has 3 or 4 best of 3s a day, or has multiple matches happening at the same time, or has us doing remote broadcasts because the studio is too expensive to run. No, I don't actually. Shut the fuck up. Viewers want to view. Yes, I think this is true. Absolutely. You can see that. But the issue with saying viewers want to view is that we've never actually had a situation in Valorant where we've flooded the scene a la CS. So we don't know what the limits of viewer fatigue actually look like. People don't know what the upper level of that is because they've been trying to do it gradually. Okay, so let me go into the next thing that I want to go to, right? So this was just talking. I wanted to go through some of the comments to this as well, but let me start with another thing, which I promise you isn't a straw man, but I don't want to call out this person directly because I am a little bit concerned about Reddit's rules about about I don't know what they call it, like dogpiling on people or something. So I saw from a couple of people, and bear in mind this was only a couple of people, but heavily upvoted comments, which seems to imply that there is some level of sentiment behind this coming from the community. And it went to the effect of, so Leo Farrier's basically saying that I need to follow challenges and game changers just to get enough Valorant this year, right? And that is so far out. And I feel like that can't even be a sentiment that's shared by most people if they used their brain for a moment. Because most viewers, again, only follow a single league, or at least the best matches of that league. The leagues have 55 regular season matches this year, plus 76 international matches, which get the highest viewership, meaning the most people are interested in the international matches, where your teams aren't guaranteed to be performing there. Funny how that doesn't fit the system, the narrative at all. Nothing about the international tournaments is planned to be adjusting in terms of, like, you know, well, actually, Madrid is a little smaller, sure. So there are, that is certainly a concern that you can bring up, but that isn't really part of this. I do agree with that, though. And if you watched all of VCT, if you just said, I don't like challenges, I don't like game changers, I only want VCT, and I want to fill my life with VCT, that is 220 regular season matches, 160 domestic playoff matches between the Kickoff Tournament, Stage 1 and Stage 2 playoffs, 76 international matches. That is 456 matches in total for 2024, up from 272 matches in 2023. That's a huge amount more matches if you don't just follow one team, which, again, most people do not. That is over 1,000 hours of VCT in 2024. You do not need challengers and game changers to max out on free Valorant this year. And by the way, good luck, Sliggy, watching it all. I mean, I'm going to hold my hands up. I ain't doing that. I'm not filling my life like a quarter of my waking hours with just watching Valorant on top of all of the work that I do. Are you mad? Are you mad? I'm going to have to pick and choose a little bit. So I understand that that is not everybody's sentiment, right? But I did see that a worrying amount, considering how utterly implausible it is as an argument. Most people, however, that are bringing this up are arguing that if you only follow one team, a couple of teams, it's really not that many matches. And so I want to move on to another topic here, which is saying that there's a general sentiment that everything was supposed to be good this year. That's another thing that I've seen cropping over and over in the Reddit threads. Everything was supposed to be fixed this year. And Riot didn't claim this. Riot did say that 2024 was going to start their normal system, which again, Leo Ferrier is saying is true. But Riot never said everything was going to be perfect this year. And again, guys, use your noggins, or at least listen to people who use their noggins. 11 teams this year was always going to make for a horrible format for at least some of the tournaments. We knew this. If you know anything about tournament formats, you would know this. Valorant releasing in China this year was also always going to push things back, so they weren't going to be able to use January properly. It was always going to disrupt the start of the year. We've known this for months, so we knew that they weren't going to be able to have the perfect system this year. It is frankly a miracle that they have VCT China up and running and ready for all of the regions to be aligned in February and synced up within a week. I think that's a bloody miracle. But I think that the disappointment and frustration tends to come from when expectation doesn't meet reality. And I can see where this expectation of an entire additional stage came from, with lock-in being touted as unique, but even this thinking is flawed. And I'll let TMV explain this because his video was very good. I wanted to go in more depth than TMV, but I want to use a clip from him here because he puts this point very well.
But to me, a big problem for Riot has come from actually things that they said last year and setting up expectations that have then not come about. Because if we take a look at this, right, when they're talking about, you know, what the 2023 season was going to be like and how it was going to work, listen to what they say.
Next year is going to introduce a new structure with 30 teams competing in 3 new international leagues. In normal years, our plan is to operate 2 international league splits each season. But as teams will be busy setting up in their new global hubs, we're going to take this opportunity to do something special.
Okay, and then they're about to announce lock-in after this, right? But what they just said essentially was, there's going to be 2 international league splits, and
And so this is where I think most people have got their expectations misaligned with reality. Now, just to look at the graphic for a moment, obviously this is not a 10-match round robin that's happening between the middle of February and the end of March. This is obvious. Now, maybe you would say that these were just temporary placeholders. You didn't realize this was misleading, etc., etc. But I think that the writing was on the wall and has been on the wall that this was the case a while back. As I said, I did a video about this earlier where I said that this was an extremely likely format as well. And the issue that people, I think, did not think through last year, because people just take things at face value rather than digging a little deeper with their brain, is that Lock-In as the first international tournament of the year was also one of the 3 international tournaments. It couldn't just replace domestic play, because it also, if you're replacing Lock-In, you also have to replace it with an international tournament. And certainly we wouldn't want it to be replaced only by domestic play. We wouldn't want to have to go down to only 2 international tournaments. We want more, if anything, right? We would like to see possibly 4 international tournaments rather than just the 3. That, to me, is the bigger deal rather than the domestic play. But that's a separate issue, and I don't want to get into it here. So Lock-In lasted 3 weeks long, from February 13th to March 5th. And they had 1 week roughly before this for prep stuff like that, and you have to have 1 week after this for, you know, teams flying back and getting set up for what was going on. There was actually almost 4 weeks after this tournament. So the season couldn't start earlier in 2024 due to VCT China's launch, and there is therefore absolutely no room for a full stage and an international tournament that would have taken up the 7 weeks that Lock-In was running. You can't do it unless you are able, as a community, to twist the linear progression of time, to grapple with chronology itself. You are limited. You are limited. You're going to have to come up with either a radically different format, or you're going to have to compromise in some way. So, if you still want the international tournament during this period of time, then you need to condense the domestic play, right? So what they've done is, domestic play is taking up the Lock-In space for this year, and Madrid is taking advantage of the 4-week break that happened after Lock-In. So, there's a 10-day break. Let me just see what I've got after this. Oh, I just pulled up VCT China. Yeah. So there's a 10-day break before Madrid, which is mostly made up of prep stuff. There's a 10-day event at Madrid, and then stage 1 is set to begin at around the same time as last year with a short break after Madrid. Now, you might say, as a counter-argument to all of this, why didn't they shift the entire season down further in order to make more room at the beginning? And that would have worked for this year. But I want to show you later on, again with this like format stuff that I've got, that while that solution would have worked for this year, it's not something that they could commit to for the long term, because there are other issues that need solving in future years, and they would have to go back and undo stage 1. And that would make people really angry. So they're trying to create a system that can actually stand the test of time here, rather than making short-term decisions that then have to be undone in horribly messy PR nightmares in the future. All of this being said, because you can't adjust the linear progression of time, because Outrage cannot do that, there is, to me, only one major reasonable complaint, which is this tweet from Leo Faria, which is Leo's assertion that this system would not be changed or improved for 2025. And it is a long-term solution. And I can see why people would be annoyed about that, because they thought that, you know, Lock-In was making problems in January. Now VCT China is making problems in January. But in 2025, we don't have either of those issues. And so you could try to make a better system that allows for more minimum matches. That's the argument. So pulling VCT China out of, sorry, not pulling VCT China out, but pulling those 4 weeks where VCT China was getting sorted at the beginning of the year out, gives you 4 weeks to work with. So that pulls the start time to mid-January. It gives you overall 7 weeks to run some kind of domestic stuff, which isn't enough for a round-robin stage, but could allow for a longer kickoff tournament format where teams get more than 2 matches played. And that, to me, is one of the main cruxes of how you could improve this. But it also wouldn't really affect what Leo's saying, because a better kickoff tournament doesn't always increase the baseline number of matches that teams play. It might have more games in the middle to make it more likely that your top teams are going to Madrid, right? If you're trying to make kickoff better, it doesn't necessarily, again, not everything can be viewed through the lens of minimum matches. There are other ways to improve formats. So I want to take some time here just to talk about the core idea of having minimum matches set at 12. Now, in future years, next year, there's going to be another team. So then you're going to have 13 matches, right? 10, 13. Then the year after that, there's going to be another team as well. So you're going to have 14 matches. Long term, there are going to be, with this exact same format, there are going to be 15 matches that are happening. Now, I'm making the assumption here from Leo's tweet that baseline number of matches not looking to increase means that they are still going to keep it accounting for just a basic round robin, where the number of matches increases by 1 each year just to account for keeping the format the same. Now, if that's not the case, they're going to screw themselves over with the format, because trying to make a 10-team league system, a 10-match league system with 12, 13, 14 teams involved, that's going to be a pain in the ass. That's going to be a bigger pain in the ass than just gradually increasing the baseline number of matches. So to me, I'm making the assumption that baseline number of matches means we play against every other team once. And it doesn't mean that it is locked in stone at 12 from forever on. Maybe that's wrong. And if so, that's where I would heavily disagree with Leo, because I think that that would not only make fans more angry, because they would like to see more minimum matches, clearly, but it also makes the format more difficult, and there's no reason to do that. So again, using the assumption that we're going to end up playing 15 minimum matches from 2027 onwards, that's now what you should have in your head. We're going towards 15 minimum matches with this current format without any changes. Should we be mad about that? Is that too few? Now, first of all, is it reasonable to use matches, more matches being played, as a reward mechanic? Better teams play more matches, worse teams play less matches. Yes, of course that's a reasonable mechanic, because a system with equal numbers of matches throughout the entire year would eliminate any ability to play in a bracket. You could never use a bracket if you wanted all the numbers of matches between all the teams to be even. I mean, it would just be an absolute nightmare, and it wouldn't be fun either. Rooting for your team to make playoffs is part of what makes sports, right? Yes, you can say that I would like a longer regular season, but I don't think there is any argument that Riot's idea that better teams should play more makes sense. There is no argument against that. That is how brackets work. That is how playoffs work. And especially when you need to have at least 2, probably 3 domestic playoff brackets occurring, and then 3 international tournaments, because the playoff brackets feed into the international tournaments. That is 6 times throughout the year where there are no guarantees. It is based on your performance, your team's performance. So that you can't account for that if you only look through the blinkered lens of minimum matches. I want to see more of people that I'm a fan of across all sports, but it's so regularly tied to performance. It's tied to performance in basically every regular sport, traditional sport that you look at. Making playoffs, making it deep in brackets, sometimes qualification entirely for events, right? Qualification entirely just to even be existing within a league structure or within, having your minimums is based on performance. So then it comes to how many matches should teams have as a minimum, right? If we're going to have this conversation about 15 not being enough long term for teams to have, then how many is reasonable? And remember, going back to this idea, that around 8 of the teams will play about 50% more than the minimum, and around 10 of the teams will play double the minimum or even more than that. So I've seen a lot of people, even pro players, I think Dazzle notably said this as well about the NFL, that were constantly comparing things to the NFL and the NBA. I think Dazzle's tweet was something like, they're playing less than the NFL and these motherfuckers get brain damage, which, yeah, that makes sense. But those comparisons are nonsense. And the reason for that is NFL and the NBA only have one, or recently in the NBA, I believe it's now two. Again, I'm not a huge fan of these, but I believe this to be true. They only have one or two instances which you could compare to our international events, where all the top teams come together and clash and they crown a winner, or at least a winner temporarily before the very end of the season. We have those all the time. We have them constantly, and people love them. They are the highest viewed things. We would not want to get rid of those things in order to just add more minimum matches. So if we were to copy the NFL format or the NBA format because people think that that's more reasonable, because people think they want more minimum matches, you'd fucking hate it. Have a thought in your head. Have a thought about, okay, I'm getting frustrated again, but my frustrations are coming from people only looking at the best parts of other systems and not how it works entirely. And you can't have a system that is only the best bits of everything, because it doesn't work. It doesn't come together. There have to be compromises within any of these systems. So let's instead use a comparison that actually makes some sense. Let's compare it to a reasonably good tier 1, or even a top tier 1 actually, Counter-Strike team. So let's have a look at FaZe. So these are FaZe Clans matches in CS throughout 2023. Now, I looked through FaZe's matches and I tried to calculate what a minimum matches would look like. Now, that is really difficult in Counter-Strike, because if they were genuinely playing the minimum, i.e. they were losing almost every game, they wouldn't even be getting invited to anywhere near as many tournaments, and they would lose their position as a tier 1 team. So actually, you know, the people who are fans of 100 Thieves or Sentinels or something like that, who are mad that the lower performance of 100 Thieves led to less exposure for their team in 2023. In most systems that you like the version of, you like the more matches being played, they would no longer be participating in a lot of tournaments because they would have been eliminated from contention. They wouldn't be considered a tier 1 team anymore, and they'd have to scrap through lower level stuff before they would be allowed to play in the big boy tournaments again. But to give some kind of rough estimate, I roughly calculated that there would be about 30 minimum matches for FaZe in 2023. Assuming that they did go to all of the ones that they were invited to and all of the ones that they previously qualified for in 2022 because of their performance, but they didn't win very much. So they didn't go to finals. They didn't go to, you know, for example, the Blast Premier World Final, that kind of stuff, because they had performed poorly earlier on in 2023. So in terms of a minimum number of games, FaZe was sat at about 30, which is double what we're looking at in the long term for VALORANT. Now, they actually played 79 matches, aligning with the rough idea of it being about 2 to 2.5x the minimum for a top-level team. So if you're a top-level team, you're playing about 2.5 times whatever you set the minimum match amount to. And that seems to correlate if you have a league play or if you have a lot of, like, an open circuit kind of tournament like this, right? So if Counter-Strike had an off-season, bear in mind, by the way, that these guys were playing from January 20th, which isn't an unreasonable time to start the year, to December 17th, which I do think seems a bit unreasonable. So if Counter-Strike had an off-season that actually lasted 3 or 4 months, something that has been touted as being a really healthy thing for leagues to implement, and that would be more reasonable than Valorant's current 6-month off-season, and more in line with what's being aimed for in 2025. So if Counter-Strike had a 3 to 4 month thing, then FaZe Clan would have roughly played about 55 matches compared to the top teams in Valorant, who were playing around 25 to 29 matches. Their minimum matches, FaZe, would be sat at about 22 if they had a 3 to 4 month off season, but they played the rest of the year at that kind of pace. And that difference in minimum matches is because more tournaments means more group stage play instead of the year being taken up with large amounts of league play. And group stages, generally, you play like 3 games a week, something like that. And where there is league play, for example, by the way, all of the players that have come from Counter-Strike know how grueling that is. In Counter-Strike, 60 days at home. In Valorant, 60 days of playing matches if you're lucky. I mean, that doesn't quite work. I mean, you get 60 days of playing matches in Counter-Strike, actually. But, you know, you have tons more traveling and that kind of stuff. But anyway, Ethan's point here, pros and cons to everything, I think is one of the more level-headed takes about this kind of stuff. But, again, there is a very common criticism of the Counter-Strike format that is way, way too overpacked. For a viewer, for a player, for everybody involved. So take a look, for example, at this, which is a league. This is the ESL Pro League. They don't structure it as a round robin. They structure it as a triple elimination group stage leading to a playoffs. They have tons more teams involved, though, and they play games at the same time on multiple streams. They play multiple matches in a week as well. And I think that, so they're splitting their viewership. They're running 4 best of 3s in a day. I think the format is more messy and difficult to follow compared to a round robin. It has more emphasis on randomized group draws and seeding, which can ruin you compared to a round robin where the strength of schedule is not a major concern at all. It's more expensive to run, right? This is only the first time that we're even mentioning money, by the way, because there's more streams, more talent required to run it, that kind of thing. But it does run on a condensed time frame with more minimum matches. Do you see there how there are positives, but there are also negatives? There is no world where you can just take the positives and not the negatives. It's about choosing which downsides you actually care more about. And of course, when you have like a Swiss system like this as well, that is also going to contribute to an increased number of games. Because again, when people play Swiss, they tend not to do it on a once per week kind of basis. They tend to do it in a more condensed format and run it as more of a group stage for a tournament, which this one was. This was the kind of play-in for the Paris Major in Europe. So if Counter-Strike is too many at 30 minimum matches, and Valorant is too little at 15 minimum matches by 2027, where's the Goldilocks zone? Is the Goldilocks zone 20? I've seen, by the way, nobody put forward an actual number that they would like to hit in Valorant. I haven't seen it. I genuinely, I have not seen that be a focal topic. Why? That's so important. If you're going to say that 12 is too little, 15 by 2027 is too little, what is your ideal? What do you want to see? So, if you want to create something in the Goldilocks zone between Counter-Strike and Valorant, let's say you want to get to 20, right, instead of 15. So you want to add 5 extra matches by 2027. How are you creating a format with 11 teams this year, 12 teams next year, 13 teams the year after, etc., with 20 minimum matches per year? You can't do that with any kind of round robin. That would require also, by the way, the intensity of Counter-Strike during the season if you were to also have the off-season. Now, you could argue that you could take it in a more relaxed manner and you wouldn't require an off-season, which I could see that being the case as well. Most leagues tend to go with an off-season rather than spacing things out massively, but that's a reasonable suggestion. Again, not one that I've seen the community make particularly. So you'd have to, so like I said, you cannot run a round-robin system very well at all that has 20 minimum matches. So you'd have to keep a single round robin. You couldn't run a double round robin. So a single round robin. And then you'd have to add back in 2 tournaments like LCQ in order to get up to that number. And then you'd have to justify them somehow. I mean, what the fuck are they going to be for? You have to come up with a reason to run the tournaments in the first place, not just because you want to see the teams being played more. I guess one of them could be like the old LCQ, and the other could be like a play-in to the Stage 2 playoffs, maybe? But they're both basically doing the same thing at that point. So I don't know. You'd have to come up with another justification for an extra LCQ tournament. If you kept LCQ, and that would only add 1 extra match. That would not take you up to the 20 that I'm just speculating people want because they won't say how many matches they actually think is reasonable. I think 15 is reasonable. So, any addition, by the way, to minimum matches is either another tournament, triple elimination, where the losing teams continue to play more before they're eliminated, or a longer league play. Now, longer league play round robins are good for league play. It ensures that strength of schedule is not a large factor. A double round robin takes too long, or it involves double match weeks, which generally... Okay, let's go to the double round robin first. A double round robin at the current pace of matches, right, where you play one a week, would require 11 weeks, an extra 11 weeks in 2024, an extra 12 weeks in 2025, an extra 13 weeks in 2026, and an extra 14 weeks from then on. I mean, 2 sets of 14 weeks from then on. Now, the reason for the extra week on both is because of playoffs as well. You can't just run the season. You have to have a playoff because we want to qualify people to international events too. So that is, by 2027, if you want a format that has double round robin, stage 1 and stage 2 are both round robins. If you want that, you're advocating for 28 weeks at the current pace of league play, domestic play. That's over 6 months without international events being included at all. That's just 6 months of domestic play. There is no space for that in any kind of reasonable calendar. You can't do it. I'll show you later. You can't do it. Now, if you wanted to increase the amount of matches that teams play instead, double match weeks have been heavily criticized whenever they're used in league play. You're able to reduce, you're unable to do as much anti-stratting and prep. There is more burnout. If the pro community completely changed their mind on this, on how they feel about double match weeks, then it would open options for more format shifts. But this is where budget might end up being an issue, right? So already the pros, from my understanding, from years of watching pros do this, and by the way, from Overwatch League, where teams played 40 matches a year, season 1, and they hated it. The viewers all seem to have some rose-tinted glasses. I saw comments on Valorant Competitive talking about how good Overwatch League Season 1 was. Talk to any pro player, they were miserable. And on top of that, the player turnover, the amount of retirement, you just lose pro players at a vast, rapid rate if you push them that hard, because they don't want the job anymore. They would rather have a normal life. So it's not feasible to do things at that level of intensity. But if the pros change their mind on it, this is where the monetary aspect would have to then be tackled. Because budget, time, again, that bastard old Captain Chronology, and viewer fatigue would be the 3 things that you would then have to account for. They would then become the limiting factors. Because days are capped at 3 best of 3s a day. You can't run a format with more than 3 best of 3s a day unless you want to double up multi-stream setups. And Riot really do not like that. I don't believe that it's good for the product. They don't believe that it's good for the product. It makes it much more difficult to keep track of what's going on. It makes the viewership numbers smaller. It makes the feel of the show more scattered. It makes it much more difficult to run a cohesive show where things lead from one thing to another. You just have streams that cut off in the middle of the day and they have to jump randomly into the middle of another match. It's a difficult thing to make work in reality. Now, when you look at traditional sports, they manage to pull it off. Traditional sports has people at a much higher rate who only follow certain teams, and they have vast amounts of money coming in to be able to solve those kind of issues. So you are capped without doing multi-streaming at 3 best of 3s a day, which is already horrible for staff. That is dreadful, running 3 best of 3s a day. And what that means is the studios, like the America Studio, Pacific Studio, etc., they would have to run 4 days a week at 3 best of 3s a day, instead of the current 3 days a week, 2 best of 3s a day. That would be roughly a third more expensive. So we're not talking about a small addition to the budget that would have to be added to cover that. We're talking about an enormous addition to the budget to have to cover that. And by the way, one of the other things that frustrates me about this topic is the sense of entitlement here, that I am a fan of this team. I deserve to be able to watch more of them playing completely for free. These viewers do not, and frequently in the past in esports, will not, refuse to pay for content, unlike traditional sports, who have the money to pay for these things because they have fans which are willing to pay cable cost, to pay for F1 TV, to pay for, pay-per-view events, things like this. The viewer base in esports is, and Valorant especially, is much younger. It doesn't have, people in their 30s as much who are, willing to pay for cable. It doesn't have boomer fans who sit in front of the TV all day and are normalized with that kind of thing. So it's much more expensive with a fan base that doesn't pay any money to watch any of this stuff, and it burns out staff more. The viewer fatigue angle is unknown. Hard to tell whether or not it would come into effect. So that's one of the big reasons against running double round robins. If you ran triple elimination, a Swiss system and some alternate triple elimination group stages are seen in Counter-Strike, and those require 3 minimum matches. And those group stages would only add to the minimum matches, though, if they were used for domestic tournaments. So, again, do you see, one of the issues is that a lot of the tools that you can use to fill out tournaments are great for the international events, but they don't work as well for league play. Do you want to run a Swiss system into a round robin? Why? What's the purpose for it? You'd have to come up with a justification even for adding an entire extra system like this. I would be in favor, however, of running a more rigorous kickoff bracket, and I will explain that later. Now, championship points are also coming in to replace LCQ, and the loss of LCQ is affecting the minimum matches that people play. It's reducing it by 1. So otherwise there would be 13 minimum matches this year. Instead, there are 12. Now, in all likelihood, again, if you think about the bucket system rather than just the minimum number of matches, the LCQ actually helps most teams' minimum match numbers a lot. It wouldn't help 1 or 2 teams. So, right? So LCQ is useful for helping about, 80%? Not 80%. Well, 80% of the affected lower level teams, but it isn't effective at helping everybody. It doesn't push the absolute minimum up very far. Now, LCQ has been removed, though, and they're going for championship points instead. And, I think comments like this pretty reasonable. LCQ does make the game pretty exciting. It is exciting to see the LCQ teams. I enjoyed watching LCQ, and I thought it was a great idea for a tournament format overall. I think, however, that over time, the people behind these decisions have decided that the championship points is probably a better system because they want to reward people that have done well at some point in the year and not teams that have done badly all the way throughout the year. And this system is going to get you more likely. It's going to help teams more like Loud, who are good at the beginning of the year, slump in the middle, and then are good at the end, right? And I think that we should be helping teams like that because they tend to do very well at the end of the year. And it doesn't help teams like Crew or Zeta Division, that kind of team, who did kind of badly all year, or in the case of Crew, very badly all year, and then spiked for a tournament at the end and still flopped when it came to champions. There have been 3 LCQ teams that have made champs playoffs before, and that's out of 14. So 3 out of 14 LCQ teams have made champs playoffs. That is very low. Cloud9 and Liquid did it in 2021. Liquid did it in 2022, and no team did it in 2023. And in the last 2 years, the LCQ teams have averaged a 33% map win rate, which is not very good at all when it comes to champs. And that's only in groups as well. That's not, they're not playing in playoffs against the really, really top teams. So the LCQ teams have had a history of just not really performing and being a bit of a flop when it comes to champs. So I can understand them going towards this method. Does it mean that it's 100% better? No, I don't think it is. And could I see them wanting to bring back LCQ in the future? Yes, I could see them wanting to bring back LCQ. But I don't think that this change is bad because it reduces the minimum number of matches. I think that there are arguments for and against it that are entirely using different criteria. The real hidden part of this entire discussion, though, is what are Riot actually doing in 2025 with all of that time? And I feel like a lot of people will have been shouting that at the screen in the first 20 minutes of this video. Why aren't you talking about the fact that they could have just moved champions later in the year and they would have all of this free time to be able to work with in 2025? So what are they actually doing? Now, they've said before in December, and by the way, Leo Faria was, I don't have the Reddit thread up, but Leo Faria was praised for his communication on this. And, it's really good having such a vocal leader who's so open with the community like Leo. Now there's a change.org petition to get him fired because he's being open with his communication. Now, yeah, so they're talking about 2025 a little bit, and they said we usually don't talk about things so far in advance, but they do want to set some expectations. They want a healthy offseason, which I think is reasonable, but they think the current calendar is too condensed when things are happening and too sparse when things aren't happening. I agree with that. I think everyone in the community agrees with that as well. The offseason has too little going on, and then the actual... when VCT is happening, it's putting pressure on pro players, like when Boaster talked about it here in this GG Recon interview with Jack Marsh. He said that you stay until the end of these events, you go again, you go again, you go again. Other teams get knocked out early and they have a week's break to recuperate, but the top teams don't have any time to recuperate and they're straight back into it. They have no time to change their compositions. They're just straight back into the action. So there was some burnout for these teams. Again, if you think about the top of the bucket, it's these teams here. The teams that were playing 18 to 29 matches in the year, they were the teams that was suffering from a little bit of burnout as well. So they wanted to try to address some of that issue. Now, I do want to go back to this Reddit thread, which was responding to my just general rambling about this whilst playing Valheim of all bloody games. And I wanted to talk about this is somebody saying it's unironically trolling to say that lock-in, that we have the same amount of games when lock-in was supposed to be replaced by a whole other stage. I hopefully have already explained why lock-in couldn't be replaced by an entire round robin, because there isn't enough time for that. It doesn't work, but I'll explain that later once we get onto the format stuff. And the one that I want to talk about specifically, hello, there's one of the fans that actually does follow only one team. So where is it? Yes. Now, if you look down further here, these are still very, pretty heavily upvoted comments, but they're not at the very, very top. So they're not the main driving thoughts of the community, but they're still, a lot of people agree with what they're talking about here. And they're talking about bUrNoUt. Again, this person's comparing it to NBA. I've said again why that doesn't make any sense, because with NBA, they have a large amount of minimum games, but they only clash twice a year, and they've only recently added that second time a year, whereas we have 3 times a year, and we want to be trying to push it for more, if at all possible. Those are the things that people care about, as viewed by the viewership data. But it's the bUrNoUt discussion here, which is started by DerryXU, who actually changed their mind throughout this, which I love. I so rarely see this in terms of discussion. But they had people responding to them who were, like this person, 90 Caliber Net, who was a trained athlete, who's also been talking about mental health and this kind of stuff. Now, the bUrNoUt is not a real issue came up way too much in this conversation, to the point where that got me real mad, because it's like every couple of years we have to have the same conversations, because the people who are now saying this weren't around a couple of years ago. Do you know what I mean? It's because esports is so new fans come up and they aren't there to hear the well thought out discussions about bUrNoUt 2 years ago. And so when we were discussing it in the Overwatch League, for example, for Season 1, or when Counter-Strike has been discussing it constantly too, like, I don't understand quite how you can be so oblivious to have missed all of the messaging about this, but I assume it's because they're either young or new fans. But this take of bUrNoUt is not a real issue came crawling out of the woodwork. Oh, but they're just playing video games. All right. when you play a video game as your professional job compared to a traditional sports job, there is no physical exhaustion point. If you work your muscles to exhaustion, that can take, I don't know, let's say 90 minutes, because that's, what this athlete gave as an example in the Reddit thread. But sure, I just went and played badminton for an hour. I wouldn't say I worked myself to exhaustion, but I could have done within an hour, I reckon, probably. I would hit a physical stopping point. If you work your brain to exhaustion, if you, as the gym rats say, work it to failure, your brain rather than your muscles, that is a very, very bad idea. And can we just take a moment to appreciate that that is the main difference here? Esports players are going to scrim, VOD review, and play ranked to improve for outrageous hours, far more than you could as a professional athlete working physically, far more. And the other problem with this as well is mental exhaustion, mental fatigue, levels of stuff like burnout, depression, anxiety, these kind of things are way harder to detect than muscle pain, exhaustion, cramps, bruising, whatever that kind of stuff would be from physical exhaustion as well. It is unhealthy to have a completely open system where the pros are incentivized to race each other to the top in terms of how much time they can put into the game. That is very unhealthy. There needs to be regulation to some degree for the players, for their safety. Regulating the matches being played is the only way of being able to enforce regulation on bUrNoUt. You can't tell the teams you're only allowed to scrim for X amount of time. We don't have that level of oversight. We don't have governing bodies that are able to check that kind of thing. That makes no sense. Besides which, they would want to stream for a certain amount of time as well and do that kind of stuff, which would come under the purview probably of doing stuff like practicing. So you can't regulate it in that kind of way. The only reasonable regulation tool you have to stop players from trying to push themselves further and further in a competitive atmosphere to win, to try to outpace the 14-year-old that doesn't have anything else in their life who can spend all of that time playing the game. The only way that you can regulate that is by making sure that you don't put as many matches as possible into the format. And that is one of the reasons why bUrNoUt is genuinely important and happens all the time. All the time. Like I said, in the Overwatch League, we had massive player turnover. You think that playing video games is a dream job, right? You think it's way better than what you do for your work. If you're forced not just to play 2 matches a week, but if you're forced to practice 10 hours a day because you have 2 matches a week, and that's the only way you can fit in everything you need to do in order to win, and because people over there are doing it, so you have to do it if you want to be able to beat them. If that's the case, then you are not going to want your dream job anymore. And we saw that with people in the Overwatch League. We see that with people in, Counter-Strike or Valorant as well, where they realize that they can't keep up. It's not for them. They don't have what it takes to put their brain on the line like that. So now let's get into what I wanted to talk about so heavily here, which is some actual scheduling graphics. Now let me walk you through what's going on here. These are not using any inside information. These are using publicly available information, like, for example, my video where I went through the roster construction rules and it detailed clearly which dates Madrid, Shanghai, and Champions was going to be happening on 4 months ago. I sometimes weep for the state of esports journalism, that I feel like I'm the only person that pays attention to these kind of things. And that I don't have a big enough platform to actually push it to the fucking masses. Or maybe I don't market it properly. Where, like, we knew there was a very good chance that the minimum number of games was going to be 12 4 months ago. Anyway, so using publicly available information, let's have a look at what I've come up with here. So I'm not sure whether you're going to be able to tell perfectly, but most of what's going on here in all of the different schedules that I've created, well, these are all different examples and I'll go through them. Most of this area is just off season, you know, where not much is happening. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit and hopefully you guys can still see what's going on, or can see to some degree what's going on without missing too much of what's happening. So this is the current actual schedule. Now, it's not 100% accurate because I've had to deduce some of these things, and in fact, some of this as well, just from, again, like rough publicly available information. But this here is the kickoff, and these are the different weeks. So there are 52 columns, one for each week. And so you can see here that the kickoff tournament lasts for 3 weeks. Then we have a 1 week break, roughly. I mean, it's more like a 10-day break or something like that, I think. But one of these weeks is completely free. And then these 2 weeks are taken up with Madrid. These weeks are taken up with Stage 1. These weeks are taken up with Shanghai. These weeks are taken up with Stage 2. These weeks are taken up with Champions. Okay? And I've used the same color format for every one of these examples. And the only difference is that I added in a theoretical ascension in blue. So let's start here with 2024. So this already, by the way, using the dates that are publicly available, and accounting for the fact that they've put about a 6-day buffer at the beginning of Madrid. So I'm assuming that there's a 6-day buffer at the beginning of Shanghai and a 6-day buffer at the beginning of their locked roster dates for Champions as well. This is what I've come up with. Now, what you'll notice here, if you're particularly perceptive, is that this already requires one super week where teams play 2 matches in a week. It already requires that. Why? I'm not exactly sure. I would imagine it's something to do with the fact that Champions was pre-booked a year in advance, and so that set limits for the rest of the schedule. That would be my speculation, but it's nothing more than that. It's simply speculation. But there is at some point, either here in Stage 1 or here in Stage 2, a super week where maybe they'll mix it up. I mean, last year, the leagues took super weeks at different times so that people didn't get overwhelmed with the amount of Valorant going on. But there is one too few weeks for the games actually being played, assuming that this is playoffs and this is playoffs as well. Okay? So let's have a look at 2025. So remember that the point of me bringing this up was, what the fuck are Riot even doing with the extra time in 2025? So let's see what they're doing with the beginning of the year. Because VCT China is not kicking off, because lock-in is not happening, you have these extra weeks. But you can't use week 1 and week 2 of January. I don't think that that's reasonable. Most people are going to be taking that break. That's a very traditional break that would be taken in the calendar. And most of the time it is more normal to start around the middle of January. So I've got all of these starting in the middle of January, not the beginning. Again, that's the same way that Counter-Strike does it. That's very normal. Don't get on my case about not starting January 1st like these motherfuckers want to play on New Year's Day. Get out my face. Okay? So you have a kickoff tournament that's running at that period of time, and then Madrid the same. Now, the only difference here, the reason that this is 1 week later in the year, right, is because for 2025, we've got, we've started earlier, and yet we're still finishing later without adding any more minimum games. So why? It's because Riot have committed to adding more breaks between events. Now, I'm speculating here that the breaks are going to be 2 weeks long. I'm purely speculating that, but that makes sense to me. That's how I would design a system like this. I would just add 1 extra week so that it doesn't get massive. I mean, maybe they'll add 2 extra weeks, but I would imagine that it'll just be 1. So you have the same kickoff tournament, same Madrid tournament, and then you have 2 weeks afterwards instead of 1. You then only need 1 week break heading into the tournament. That's not an issue with bUrNoUt. And then you have the 2 week break again here. And then you have a 2 week break again heading into Champions. Now, maybe you would only need a 1 week break heading into Champions, but most of the time, there's a slightly longer gap than that. So you still have a fairly long off season, but this has a 4.5 month off season instead of a 6 month off season. So because you're pulling things earlier in the year, and because you're starting next year earlier as well, Rather than the 2023 to 2024 offseason, which was about 6 months long, this is only 4.5 months. Now, most people have been talking about a 3 to 4 month offseason as being, you know, the goal, what seems reasonable. I could see, though, that with these added mental health breaks, if you want to call them like that you could make the offseason shorter. So I've created this 2025 alternate calendar. And what I've gone into here is a better kickoff tournament format, which takes an extra week. And I'm going to go through that format later. You can go and have a look at the timestamp if you're really interested right now and come back. But a better kickoff format, a longer Madrid, which I think would be a better thing for everybody than just adding another minimum match. Again, most people care about the international tournaments, and making those better helps more people, more viewers, not necessarily more teams, but more of the fan base, more of the scene gets fulfillment out of that. So this is my proposal, is a different kickoff tournament format, a slightly longer Madrid to make it similar to Shanghai. Obviously, it won't be placed in Madrid in 2025. And then the same breaks of 2 weeks after both of the tournaments. And what I would do as well is I would carve out a specific break between Stage 2 playoffs and Champions for Ascension. And I would give Ascension its own block in the season to live, because I think that is very rewarding. Ascension is essentially a Tier 1 event. It's promoting the Tier 1 team for the year afterwards. So to me, it deserves its space in the calendar. It deserves its space to not be overlapping with some Tier 1 event that people are going to watch instead. And arguably, you could also fit game changers into this same 4-month break. And this would then use up more space, condense the off-season, and what you would have here is a 3.5-month off-season, which to me is a really good sweet spot. So I really like this version of the 2025 alternate calendar. And to be clear, nothing that Leo Faria has said goes against this. This would not fundamentally alter the baseline number of matches that teams play. This would not. It's not adding LCQ back. It would possibly add one more baseline match during kickoff. But even that's debatable. You could still expand the tournament and make it better in other ways. Right. On top of that, something else I should have mentioned as well is this 2025 calendar, in order to give people more of this, space, this removes the Super Week that was otherwise here. So you're just playing one match per week throughout this. And it also accounts for the fact that there will be one extra team involved. Right? So that's where I've come to with the 2025. Now, in all of this, though, you must keep in mind 2027. Yeah? Because for 2027... I'm sorry, that shouldn't say 2027 alt. That should just say 2027. Oh, no, it should say 2027 alt, actually. So this is taking the 2025 alt calendar and expanding it to 2027 to show you guys what it would look like once there are the maximum number of teams actually in the league. So once there are 14 teams in each of the leagues, that means that you have to add an extra week onto the regular stage. By the way, this is just one round robin still that's been split in half. Look how big these fucking round robins are. Look how much of the year they take up, unless you're willing to play multiple matches a week, which again, the pro players have been against in the past. And if they change their mind, it would open up different formats. So, right. So this 2027, adding the extra teams means adding an extra week. And this pushes the season to a 3.5-month off-season where you have nothing going on in October, November, December. And then the first half of January. But other than that, without making any changes, without adding LCQ back, without, adding another entire round robin, you're already taking up the space from January all the way to the end of September in a manner that allows the top level teams to not have bUrNoUt, and it gives a minimum number of matches of 15, possibly 16, depending on what the kickoff format is. Right? So this is why I'm in favor of this system. Because once you look at it in 2027, it actually fills out the calendar. It doesn't leave you with a shitty off-season. And it doesn't leave you, in my opinion, with a tiny amount of games. It leaves you with, you're playing 7 matches before Shanghai. I think that's enough. Maybe 5 isn't this year, but I think 7 is as a long-term solution. And I think that trying to create the perfect solution for 2024 that you then have to undo is a PR disaster for the future. Getting the system right now so that you can grow into it is a good thing. Now, I'm going to show you 2 more, which are the 2 systems that I have seen proposed by the community most often. So I'm going to put this all the way up at the top so that you can see the first one. And this one I've just labeled community. So this system is what people thought was going to be happening this year. A full round robin that I've labeled stage 1, then Madrid for 3 weeks because people thought it was going to be a long tournament, then a health break like the top pros need, because you can't ignore that, then stage 2 as a full round robin, then Shanghai, then a large gap, because you need a large gap between Shanghai and Champions. What the fuck is the point of going straight from Shanghai into Champions? You need at least some gap in order to give the teams a break to see different things, to see different matchups. And then during that period of time, you could run Ascension, you could run Game Changers Championships here as well. So this is what the community proposed for this year. Okay? 2 full round-robin stages. It works. It works for 2024. It's a bit weird because you have back-to-back tournaments of Shanghai and then Champions without, some level of something in between. But, I mean, maybe you could argue that LCQ could go in this slot instead of Ascension. Right? Okay, that's fine. Now, look what happens when we adjust this for 2027, right? If you take this format and you add 3 weeks onto it, okay, shit. Now we've got to move this back to here. Okay, and now we have to add 3 weeks onto this. 1, 2, 3. And now we have to move this back another 3 weeks. 1, 2, 3. Now, the earliest that we could be playing, this is if the community's idea was used in 2027. Now the earliest that we could be playing Champions, if we played it immediately after Shanghai, is the middle of October. Right? So if we move the Champions over to here, that's the earliest that we could play it. And that would give you a 2-month off-season. If you want space for Ascension in the calendar, or Game Changers Championships, or you want LCQ, right? Or you just want a break, which would be very reasonable between Shanghai and Champions. In a more normal format like this, you would be playing until the end of November, until like December 1st, or November 30th or something. And you would have a 1-month off season. And that would be with the double round robin. Now, you could make the argument that with these extra wellness breaks in the middle, right, here and here, maybe the pros wouldn't be requiring a long off season. Maybe. But this completely, it's not an off season anymore. It's a 1-month break before you just get straight back into the action happening all over again. And this would put enormous amounts of stress on other parts of the product. Ascension would be happening over here in like October time. and that would give the skin designers almost no time to try to create proper team skins for the beginning of the year. Champions is right here, and Worlds is like here. So you'd be acquiring either, you'd have vastly larger expenses as Riot has to build out a whole new amount of staff to run Worlds at the same time as Valorant. You'd also probably eat into the viewership a little bit because there is about a 10% crossover with Valorant fans and League fans. And you would make the show worse because a lot of the best producers, stage designers, all sorts of people who work on Champions would be working on Worlds instead. Because, like it or not, guys, it is the second product. And Riot is not going to simply view Valorant as a professional cash-burning exercise and hire an entire new company to just look after it, right? So, for a few reasons, this is not a feasible option. And even if it was a feasible option, it would give you a 1 month off season. So, there's a community alternate idea that I've put down here, which has normal kickoff, normal Madrid, but then it has your round robins on either side of Shanghai. And what this means is that you have one kind of as a qualifier for Shanghai and then one as a qualifier for Champions. Because again, one of the other problems with this original format is that you only are qualifying to Champions based off what you've done before in the year to get to Madrid and Shanghai anyway. So if you haven't made it to Madrid and Shanghai, I mean, unless you jam another LCQ in here as well, which just packs the calendar to a comical level, then you have no particular qualifier for Champions. So instead, if you try to address that by putting the round robins on either side of Shanghai, one as a qualifier for Shanghai, or Masters 2, just in general, and one as a qualifier for Champions, just in general. Okay, this year, again, that would work. In 2024, that would work. But in 2027, again, we add 3 weeks on either side of these, and suddenly it doesn't look reasonable anymore. Suddenly, you are now playing deep into December. And this is without an LCQ, without space for Ascension. Sorry, let me scroll so that you can see here. This is the alternate proposal where you still have short qualifier heading into the first international event, and then stage 1, full round robin, Shanghai, full stage 2 into Champions. Again, this is not feasible. Champions is pushed too late into the year. You also have an off-season that's 1 month long. It doesn't work in the long term. It does work for 2024, but it would require them to undo the format almost entirely back to how we currently have it. You might as well just bite the bullet now and grow into the situation. So, my biggest issue with the format is the Kickoff Tournament. And assuming that they keep the same idea for next year. 11 teams does require an unusual format. And that's why we've ended up with something like this, I think. You need a team that's ahead in some way, right? Either the team that came the furthest in Champions or the team that won the International League. For Americas, that would be either EG, if you did it the Champions route, which they've gone with, or Loud, if you did it the winner of the domestic route, which they didn't go with. So for 11 teams, you actually need a team that gets a bye. You need one. So that's why you've got this situation that some pro players like Finesse are calling kind of ridiculous.
You see the VCT format announcement? EG only needs to win 2 matches to make Madrid. What? That cap? They got a seeding advantage from last year with a different lineup? Like, what is that? Wait, Sam, you trying to, like, hop in the team? Maybe we'll go to Madrid? You mean 2 matches? That is a humongous advantage. Derek's on EG?
Did we just join EG?
If EG get Crew and MIBR in their bracket, I'll be very mad. Not a chance. They wouldn't do that. Joggimo, Apoth, Nature, Superman, Derek. Holy mid, am I right? EG actually has a chance to go to Madrid. I mean, they always had a chance, bro. But that's weird, right, chat? Am
That's
I the only
kind.
one think that's weird? Dude, why give that much of an advantage in the next year with a completely different roster? I don't know about that. I feel like it should start. It's already such high stakes. Only 2 teams make it. How the are you getting an advantage? It should be a clean slate for every team, considering every team has made changes. It's a whole new year. How the are we still living in the past and giving people free seeding? Let them earn that seeding. If they win, it's different. I'm not even playing. I'd be losing my if I was a player. See the VCT
So,
format announcement?
Again, those are reasonable complaints about the format, but the crux of the problem is that designing a format with 11 teams means that you're almost obligated. That it's really, really difficult to come up with formats that don't require some level of seeding. And what they've gone with, they've gone with a format here that is about the best that you can do, although I would tweak it a little, and it requires one team to have a seeding advantage. So that's why when Finesse says every team should be out on a clean slate, no team should have an advantage, that isn't possible. One team has to have an advantage. But should it be a team that's made changes? Now, you could caveat this with a 3 out of 5 rule. And what I mean by that is you need to keep 3 out of 5 of your players in order to keep the seeding advantage, right? So the only team that this would affect, though, is EG. I mean, they would get replaced by Loud, because Loud were the team that kept 4 of their players but went pretty damn deep at champions. But the other teams would be exactly the same. PaperX, Fnatic, EDG. Those are the teams in the other regions who are getting the bye, and that would be exactly the same. So if this rule was in place, it gives the players more negotiating power in the off-season because they hold the keys to an easier ride for next year. That's pretty cool. But the other part to this is, I think Finesse's comment of living in the past, I think that's what we tend to do, is that we compare the last year to this year. In Valorant, we do tend to keep running narratives going for organizations, even when they change up their rosters fairly heavily. We still compare the old level of Sentinel's success with the modern level of the organization, because it's relevant, because it's still the same organization and they've still kept some of the pieces around and they're still in the same sphere. They're still the same brand that's still trying to achieve the same things. We still do that with Fnatic, despite the fact that it's only Boaster from the very beginning of the team and only Boaster and Durka from when they first made that Reykjavik run way back in the mists of time in 2021. It's still relevant to think about that as being the same team, even though they've ship of Theseus'd their way through many other players in the meantime. There are plenty of other examples of this as well, like 100 Thieves and Cloud9 and all sorts of teams that we compare to prior rosters to talk about really whether or not they've made good changes in the offseason or whether or not, all sorts of reasons why we would compare the past to the present and keep running narratives going. The ship of Theseus makes a 3 out of 5 rule make sense over the long term, but for a single offseason, yeah, I think it would be quite reasonable to implement a rule like that, but I don't think it's absolutely necessary. And it's also something that is not going to be relevant next year, because next year when you have 12 teams, if they keep the same format, you won't need a team that has a bye. So there won't even be a need for this. Now, the teams are seeded into pools, so we don't know who these other teams are. People were speculating that they know that this is EG, so they were thinking that these 2 teams were definitely MIBR and Crew, or definitely MIBR and G2 or something. That's not true. We don't know that. But we do know, in terms of minimum matches played, the bottom 3 teams are going to play 2 minimum matches. The next bottom 2 teams are going to play 3 matches. The middle 2 teams will play 5 matches. The play-in winner will play 6 matches in this format. And the top 3 teams will play 3 matches. Now, that entire thing is minus 1 match for whichever route EG takes. Right? So, again, this kind of format, it's bad for the teams at the very, very bottom because they don't get very much playtime. But for everybody in the middle and for the people at the top, it's a very reasonable system. So, could you make some changes to this that would make it better for the teams at the very bottom and fairer in terms of getting the right teams to Madrid? Because I think that's a big issue as well, right? So I'm going to start with the single elimination playoff portion of it, because I think that's a really big issue, because I think there's a decent chance that we will not get the 2 best teams going to Madrid. Single elimination playoffs have about a 40% chance. This is rough maths, but they have about a 40% chance that the semi-finals here, without the play-in winner there, are the 2 best teams. Right? And you'll have to roughly follow my napkin math here. So there's 4 scenarios that reflect reality. Either the top 2 teams are the winners of Group A and B, the winners of Group A and C, the winners of Group B and C, or the top 2 teams come from a specific group. Either both from Group A, both from Group B, both from Group C. But there's 4 scenarios there. In the scenario where both of the top 2 teams are in the same group, well, there's no problem with that, because one of them will be on one side of the bracket and one of them will be on the other. They'll both win their matches and they'll both make it. This is assuming, of course, that upsets don't happen, right? And that the best team always wins, which, of course, it doesn't. But when you're designing formats, you should try to think about, does my format allow the best teams to progress? Or do they get eliminated early, but without having a say in the matter? So, if the 2 best teams are, for example, the top team from Group B and the top team from Group C, but one of the teams from B or C wins the play-ins, so they're the 4th best team. The 4th best team is from Group B or C, and the 2 best teams are from Group B and Group C. Then the winner of Group A, who is the 3rd best team in this scenario, has a 50% chance to draw the play-in winner, win, and go to Madrid, even though they were the 3rd best. So this system creates about a 40% chance that the 3rd best team still makes it, even though they're the 3rd best. So I think that there are better systems here that you could use. You could use a double elimination playoff, which would make it much more likely that you get the top 2 for Madrid rather than number 1 and number 3. This would require 3 extra best of 3 matches, right? So that's 2 extra days of matches. With the extra time in 2025, I think that that's a worthy use of this time. But that doesn't address the narrative of minimum matches. You could, however, make this a triple elimination tournament, right? So basically, you make it so that there's a secondary play-ins and this play-ins is for the lowest teams rather than the second highest teams. So what you would do in this situation is that when the teams lose, they go into a play-ins. The winner of the play-ins out of these bottom teams joins the second place teams in the in another group stage to find the final 4th playoff team. So you automatically promote all of these Group A number 1, Group B number 1, Group C number 1. And then you have an extra stage of elimination for all the bottom level teams. That would add another, as I make it, 6 best of 3s over the course of 3 days, which I think, again, is another good usage of extra days in 2025. It would only increase the minimum number of matches by 1. I mean, that you could create a system that would increase it by 2, I think. But it would be a massively better system because it would genuinely give the bottom level teams a chance to prove themselves that they deserve to be able to progress deeper into the tournament rather than just getting knocked out immediately with 2 matches. But if you view it only through the perspective of minimum matches, it only increases the minimum number of matches by 1, maybe even 2. So once more, It's a bad metric to view everything through. An alternative system for this kind of stuff would be Swiss, but it has far fewer average matches, leading to a less rigorous feel, I think, for the teams who make it to the playoffs. So I'd be in favor of just adding an extra level of elimination to the Kickoff Tournament and making the playoffs double elimination. All of this adding 9 best of 3s over another 5 days, which adds 1 extra week, which I already demonstrated in my alternate format that I went through earlier. If you've made it this far through an hour and a half of me ranting and raving like a lunatic, I hope you can appreciate that there is a lot of thought that has to be put into these kind of decisions, and that every benefit that you try to get in a system like this has an associated negative that usually comes with it. And for that reason, it is ludicrous to be throwing around things like Leo Faria should be fired for this tournament format that we've used before in 2022, the golden era that everyone wants to go back to in pre-franchising because they all have rose-tinted glasses on, and a format that has 1 extra match compared to last year when people were broadly speaking happy, though some particular fan bases, like the 100 Thieves fan base, were not because their team played only, let me just double check, 13 matches last year. So I hope that you can appreciate there's a lot more that goes into these kind of discussions, and having a knee-jerk emotive reaction to a number without proposing an improvement, without proposing how many matches you think is a good thing to aim for, and without proposing some kind of modification that makes any sense, is just... I don't really know what the word is. It's just negativity. It's not constructive criticism. It's just negative. It doesn't offer a route forward. It only seeks to feed the entitled whining. I hope you're able to learn something from this video, if you made it this far. If you just picked and chose which bits of the video you wanted to look at based on the timestamps, more power to you. If you didn't change your mind and you think that you have a better tournament format, by all means, make a version of one of these. It's pretty easy on Excel, and send it to me. And make sure that you account for what would happen in 2027, and you don't just account for what's happening this year. Right? And by all means, I'll take a look at some of them. I'll discuss them on my stream. I'm open to this, and more so, guys, Riot is open to feedback. Genuinely, Riot is open to feedback about these kind of things, but it has to actually be thought through, sensible feedback. It can't just be, what the fuck? Only 12 matches? Why would I want to take